do want to tell a bit of a story today, and I want to tell the story of how to make change in organizations and to make revolutionary change, despite the fact that you're busy with a lot of things already in your organization that you need to continue to do to keep that business running. And so to do that through evolution. So the reality is that in technology today, we're in a constant state of migration. We are always trying to introduce something new. We often are still trying to finish off the last thing we tried to introduce new before we start picking up the next thing that we want to do that's new. And that's because these migrations have really long tails. I joined a company a few years ago where they had just completed their cloud migration. And it was a huge success, to be clear. It was a fantastic engineering effort. They did a great job. There were just those last few pesky servers on site in the business, in the office. I left that company 2 years later, and those servers were still there, and they didn't actually get rid of those servers until COVID hit, and they got rid of the office, and they had to get rid of those servers. That's the long tail that we're all dealing with all of our migrations. This isn't just a industry-wide kind of comic. Everyone loves XKCD. We talk about how everyone wants to introduce a new standard. This is also our internal challenges. Something like 70 or 80% of all of our credit card transactions still go through mainframes. So if you think you're trying to introduce functions as a service or WASM or all these new things, you very well might be. And they very well might be valuable to your organization, but you probably still have a lot of business value sitting on Kubernetes, virtual machines, mainframes, depending on how far back your organization goes. And that's true for languages and CI servers and everything else. We talked, just the last talk mentioned a move from Jenkins to GitHub Actions, right? Who hasn't been through that transition? But despite all the smiles, all the realizations, we're always in migrations, we're always so hungry for that next silver bullet. We want it, and so we keep doing these migrations. We keep thinking this will be the one that is going to work for us, right? We're going to be done with these migrations. This is going to be our solution. And we look at home pages that promise us things like integrating with all your tools. I don't know about you, but not all of my organization is on Kubernetes using Helm. Like, I also have all these virtual machines and other things I'm doing. They also make promises like everything that you need in an application platform can be delivered by this one tool. Promises like a seamless CI/CD with no configuration. Snap your fingers, it's done, right? Promises, silver bullets. A routine, every developer's routine in one place. I don't know about you, I feel like even when it comes down to whether you should have light mode or dark mode in your IDE, it's a change. So try putting every developer routine into a single place. I don't know if that's going to be possible. Consistently codify all your processes, right? Business processes, one place, one easy-to-go location, silver bullet, right? The thing is I'm not up here trying to tell us to stay stable, to tell us to throw away anything new. I'm not even telling us to not get excited about the next new thing that can appear like a silver bullet, can appear like a promise that's hard to keep. Honestly, that one's mine. You look at the homepage for Cradix and you'll see this on there. Because the thing is if we want to get better, we have to be open to revolutionary change. Things that seem impossible, things that seem hard to do. What I am challenging us to think about as an industry is to stop trying to get excited about and take on these quick starts. These quick starts that tell you to spin up a local Kubernetes cluster, install just their one product, and then look how perfect it is. It's going to do everything that we promised on our homepage for you, without taking into account what that looks like in your environment, with your tens or hundreds of Kubernetes clusters, with your Kubernetes version that's a few years old, no matter how much you want to get that upgraded, and with all the things that you have that are in other types of compute and other types of requirements. So, to be clear, I am here talking about what I hope will be revolutionary change. So I think we need to continue to crave new things. We need to continue to strive to make things better. And we need to drive towards these revolutionary improvements as an industry, within our organizations, as engineers. So what does revolutionary look like in the platform engineering space, in the DevOps space? I think that the CNCF, which is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, tries to take a stab at this with what they released as a maturity model in April of last year. This was done by the Platforms Working Group, which I'm one of the co-leads for. And what we tried to do was take information from all of our members, which is over 50 people contributed to this model. And these are organizations of big and small size, of different domains, of different backgrounds. And what does it look like to be successful in platforms? Specifically, we have these aspects that are on the vertical about investment and adoption, interfaces, operations, and management. And we also have the levels, which we've named to try and indicate where a company might need to be. So not every organization needs to be scalable. They might be at a small organization, pre-product market fit as a tool, or pre-kind of growth with consumers. And so why invest in scalable platforms when you don't yet know if you have a viable business? In contrast, if you are a large multinational and you are handling millions of transactions a minute, if you're not at that scalable level, you are burning your people out because they are on call for things that they can't maintain. So we're trying to just help people ground where they want to be and where they should be in something like this table. The key here is that you don't have to be all provisional or all operational. You might dance around this table a little bit. And at the end of the day, what this table does is try and show you what the North Star might look like as your organization transforms and grows and has new needs, right? So we put out that optimizing column knowing that that's not where people are today, and many people don't even need to be there today. But people might want to understand what good looks like, so that as they're investing in that provisional level, that operational level, they're doing so with an eye towards the future, so that they can try and to see those migrations on the horizon, build tools, use tools, buy tools that will meet their needs as they grow. So in my experience with the working group and with the industry, I find that most people sit around here, give or take. This is where I was when I was on my last few platform engineering teams. We had a lot of standard tooling. We used infrastructure as code, so people were all kind of feeding into Terraform and Ansible repositories. Our team was a big internal marketing division in some ways, where we had to go out to teams and sort of coach them into wanting to use the things we were building. But we had a team. We were a dedicated team that spent our time and energy and had funding to do this work. But we also had our challenges. I mean, I've been through my fair share of CVE security incidents where someone asks, well, who's affected? And we're like, we'll get back to you. And we have to scramble and figure out where the problem is. And so when we're talking about that operations of the platform and what we offer, we sometimes end up in a more ad hoc provisional way to that. Now, where do we want to be? What is revolutionary if that's where you find yourself today? One of the big ones that seems to get a lot of arguments from people is that code templates is sort of at the operational scale. Yes, that provides consistency. Yes, that provides repeatability. But code templates require your users to understand what's going on in that code. It also has a very complex lifecycle management process, because how do you manage upgrades of those code templates and things? So revolutionary for platforms today is thinking about how code templates are a step towards integrated services that work almost like a cloud provider, but internal to your organization. They codify your business requirements, but work behind an API where you only have to use the product you requested rather than manage it yourself, because not everyone in your organization needs to be a database expert and operational. Another way of turning this revolutionary is to enable anybody to extend a platform, and to do so safely. When we talk about platforms today in technology, we often think of this in a very one-directional way. We have this dedicated team who is providing a platform to the rest of the organization. They're in charge of that backlog, and hopefully they're positioning themselves as a product and hearing feedback from people and making sure to incorporate that in how they're building. But they are the gatekeepers to the internal platform. How can we switch that to a bi-directional platform, to something where that platform team is in charge of enabling the experts within their organization to release capabilities to other people in their organization in a consistent, discoverable, safe way? We turn into something like in Etsy or an Uber or something where you're connecting parts of your organization. The platform is about making those connections possible, not about just owning 100% of the offerings on the platform. The last one I'm going to speak about is day 2. And this is where I talk about those long tails of migrations. So often we get really excited about bootstrapping a new application. Everybody's first product on their platform is how to start up a new application. That is a use case for some organizations. If you look at Monzo, for example, if you've ever seen their architecture, the Death Star, it's nicknamed, right? How many applications and different services they use, of course they need to bootstrap new applications. But how many organizations do we work in where that is the #1 challenge of the org? Maybe not, right? Maybe it's more about how do we maintain the existing services? How do we extend them? So if we're putting into place things that are hard to manage over the long haul, we are in a world of pain, and we need to kind of revolutionize that expectation around day 2 management. What is the long tail? So I hope I sold that everyone wants to be here. I definitely will reiterate that not everyone needs to be here today. So please invest in the things that make sense for your organization at the time your organization needs it. But understand that that is possible and that it's becoming less and less expensive to actually have these kinds of capabilities within your org. And so maybe it will make more sense for you. So we want to get there, but we're kind of in this other world, and we're tired. As I said, I've been an on-call engineer, I've been a platform engineer, an SRE, I've done all these things, and most of my time is spent managing things that are already running, things that are keeping our business making money, things that are keeping, keeping the lights on, basically. Maintenance takes up a large part of our time as platform engineers and internal tooling engineers. So if we believe that those revolutionary ideas are attainable, which I think they are, and that they're revolutionary to the platform engineering space, how do we reach them? We do so by acknowledging that we need evolutionary steps to get there. We can't just stop the business in order to invest in our internal platforms. What do you think pays for those internal platforms? It is the things that are running on it today, and we need to find ways to enable those in the long term. So what does that? Why do we get this maintenance ditch? What does it look like? We get our platform engineers here on the left-hand side, super excited to codify their infrastructure as code, maybe into Terraform. They're excited because they're providing versions to it. So they're really advanced users, I'd say, of code templates. They have versions that enable people to upgrade and follow that path. And they have some awesome users. They have these users on some of their application teams that pull in every version as it comes. They have alerts on, watching on the repos for new versions, and they pull it in. They have some other users that are pretty good. They pay attention and they pull in when they can, but they tend to fall a little bit behind on that maintenance schedule. And then they have some more users that are busy, because it's not just platform engineers that are busy at your organization. You have product teams that are also busy, that are probably entire major versions behind whatever it is that you're releasing. And you may not even know what version they're using, depending on the observability you have for your templates, right? What are your pull metrics and things like that? This is a maintenance ditch. This is your long tail. This is what you need to worry about when you're thinking about rolling out new things for your platform. What can we do instead? We can introduce an API. APIs are really commonplace outside of platform engineering. It's to think about building a modern product today that doesn't have an API for users to hit feels wrong. Why would we ever expose our paying customers to the implementation behind the scenes? Why would we ever tie our ability to innovate and introduce new ideas to what our users actually interact with? We introduced the APIs because we use what's called the facade pattern. Again, something that we see in software engineering all of the time. But why is it so challenging to see this applied to platform engineering? A facade pattern takes what you currently pass as straight through to implementation, and it puts an API in the middle. all of a sudden with this API, you now have the ability to communicate to any implementation you want. This is where you can start to introduce things like parallel streams, so you can have the same request actually answered by 2 different backends and compare if they get the same answer, which gives you real-time production-level testing before you switch users over to the new implementation. These requests now go from this API to implementation, which gives this kind of separation of concerns, a contract of types, where people who want to use the features are able to use those features, and the people who want to implement can change their tools as and when they need to innovate and revolutionize how that organization runs. So, bit of a demo today. So we've got the big thing I want to talk about, or I am talking about, is how I don't want to do demos that are a brand new Kubernetes cluster that has nothing running in it, because that's just not what organizations look like. So what I've used here is Kubefirst, which is an open source product that puts up Kubernetes clusters with all sorts of things in it. It is still kind of new in the sense that I don't have a running infrastructure for an organization behind the scenes, but it has the reality of life. It has a Vault, it has Argo CD, DevOps, and the way that this works is it gives you a GitOps repo that you can commit code to, and it reads from it. So use Argo CD, if you've never used that, to do GitOps and pull the code in. So that's sort of my setup on my local machine. So it's a cluster with a bunch of stuff on it. So let's have a think about where we want to go. So I have the magical type for me hands, because spelling on a good day isn't good. Spelling in front of all of you is even harder. But this is all active, and you'll see I do a lot with the machine as well. Here is where we are today. We're in a world where we're really proud and excited about our infrastructure as code. But it has some aspects to it that we want to enable users to change, and some aspects to it that we don't want users to change because it matters to our organization to codify it. So we have this Terraform file that creates an S3 bucket, and we as a team work really hard, and we pull these things together into a module. This is great. All of a sudden, users are no longer interacting directly with Terraform. They no longer have an option to have a public bucket, because no one needs that on their security hands. But they do set things that matter to them. They can tell us what their name is, they can give us some tags, whatever it is that's important to your organization. This is where we get to standardized tooling. So this is great, and you can actually, people can use this, but people need to understand HCL, they need to pull in this code, and they need to then probably maintain whatever's behind the scenes. Who's in charge of that S3 bucket as it progresses, as new requirements come into the organization? You get left in that maintenance challenge, right? Where someone's pulling in the new module and someone's not. So what if we were to change this into an API? What I'm doing here is I'm introducing what's called a promise. This is the main construct of the Kradix product that I'm helping build, but there are lots of tools out there that can create these APIs, just to be clear. This is obviously the one I'm the most familiar with, and that's why I'm using it. What this promise does is it introduces an API for people to make requests to. When not only does that API allow people to make requests, but it actually starts to become discoverable, because now we have a consistent way of identifying what is available on our platform. We have buckets that are available. You can see here that we have a status of available. How did that happen? What that does is it actually runs a pipeline behind the scenes, because when we're introducing something as a service in our organization, we have things we need to set up. If you're offering buckets as a service, you need accounts that you're making these buckets in. You need the Terraform modules that are going to be setting the tone for those buckets. And so we can run a set of commands as a pipeline to set up that process for you. And if I had been quicker on the trigger, you would have seen that start as unavailable and switch to available, but I was not. With that in, we now have the ability to make a request to it. So here's our API. We have those 2 fields, the suffix and the team name, that people can request. And this probably looks a little bit like a Terraform module use case. Kind of like, yeah, you just Kubernetesified the thing that we're already doing, right? It looks pretty similar. You still need people to fill in fields and submit requests. I'll get there, don't worry. But first, let's make that request. So we introduce that request to Kubernetes, and we create a new bucket in that way. Similar to the promise level, we also are able to introduce business level concerns on each and every request. And so you can see that the status is pending right now because we haven't yet completed that request. What's happening is that we are running another one of those pipelines in order to run any requirements that we have as an organization. You can see there's 4 steps to this pipeline. It's doing things like the Terraform plan and apply, and it's doing things like checking cost of that infrastructure before creating it, and security scans and reporting and things like that. So the logs take a minute because it is Terraform plans and applies. So gonna throw up some of those logs so you can see what's happening behind the scenes. I'm using a tool called Stern. If you haven't used it, it's a great CLI tool for tracking Terraform. And again, I just talked too much, so we're already at Terraform. So you can see that the apply was complete and done, and that is now done automatically on a request to this API. But as I said, what you saw was kind of the same thing as a Terraform module there. Like, people still need to fill things in. They still need to understand YAML and Kubernetes, and that's maybe not where your engineers are or where your engineers want to be. So what you might do, if you're kind of in the platform engineering world today, you might be like, I've got it. I'm going to introduce a portal. If I have a website that people can make this request through, then it's going to be different. Then it's going to be true user experience. And if you're in the open source world, you very well might use Backstage as that portal. And what you can see here is that we have a Backstage, and we've got our bucket in there. And we've got our sample bucket. So we're automatically kind of filling this, this catalog of things. And I can prove we're automatically filling it because if I introduce a new capability, sorry, we're still on Jenkins, we're not yet on GitHub Actions, into the platform, that will run, and what that will do is go and introduce another component into our catalog. So we're getting automatic creation of these user interfaces because an API is a contract. From an API, you can create things like CLIs automatically, things like portals automatically. Not only can you track things in here, but you can also introduce templates to try and create that new user experience for some people that don't want to understand Kubernetes. So I want to create a bucket. Instead of using that CLI tool I used before, kubectl, I can create the Abby bucket and the default namespace, and you can choose what your users have to introduce and fill in and what's defaults. The suffix, FE code. Let's add an FE code to there, and a team live demo. You know, so far so good. And people are given feedback to this. Now you're starting to get a different experience than that Terraform module experience, right? You're giving people what maybe is a better experience for them. Depends on your org. So we create this bucket. It takes a second, and what it does is it actually makes a commit into a repository. So you can see here, this top line, we've made a commit just now that is creating this bucket. So again, Argo CD, every 3 minutes would refresh this automatically, but I don't have time for that. No one's got time for that. So I'm going to tell it to go read that GitHub repository, and you can see in the background here that it's going out of sync and resynced. So if I go back to my magical typer, we can, I went back to the portal already. We can go and get buckets, and we're going to see that we have now 2 buckets because I've created one through kubectl and I've created one through the portal. Again, all discoverable. And you can see it's pending, and that's because I have to run the Terraform, and it takes a couple minutes, and that's OK because we're giving feedback and the users can see what's going on. That's cool, maybe, to some people, but I don't think portals are what's going to be revolutionary in our industry. I think we've had websites for a long time. Some people love them, some people hate them, and no matter how much you love them, you probably still have CI/CD pipelines that you need to automate, right? But we have an API. We can now revolutionize because we have that contract that can split the 2 worlds. All of a sudden, we want to say, Terraform isn't right for us. It might be the license change, it might be the style of code, it might be something else. We want to instead introduce a new background. So let's say we want to use crossplane. Go open source, right? And how would we do that in this world? Well, let's go under the covers a little bit of what we installed with this promise. This promise encapsulates something as a service, anything as a service. What is a service? Well, you can see a service has some dependencies, some things it has to set up. A service has an API. So this is a CRD here, which if you're familiar with Kubernetes, you'll see it will get nicer as an experience for developers, where you can set the fields and you can set required fields, not required fields, things like that. And down here at the bottom, you can see a concept called workflows. This is those pods that we're running, all the things that have to do with your business. They're Docker images. Docker images can be changed. They can be introducing new versions. And this is where we can introduce the changes that we need to. So let's look at what a difference might look like from an implementation of a workflow that uses Terraform to one that uses Crossplane. Sorry, this one has a lot of text to it. But this is because these are two files on my machine that need to be compared. What happens is we all of a sudden have a script that's running in that pipeline that goes from a fairly complex thing that goes to GitHub and pulls things down and checks for changes and with a Terraform plan, and then runs that Terraform, gets that Git pushed to like, it's cool. I'm just going to create a Crossplane claim and send that off to Kubernetes, and it'll do it for me. Revolutionary when it comes to infrastructure as code. You get now live reconciliation loops and things like that. So a lot of people are excited about this technology. So what does this look like when we have to change the promise itself? Not much. We just get to remove some of the complexity around what to do on a delete of an item. So with Terraform, we have to run a plan and a delete and an apply and all these things. With Crossplane, we just delete the claim. And when you're using GitOps, this is a really simple file deletion process. We don't need a whole pipeline to do that. So let's apply this new promise that I've just compared to the old one. And we can see that all I've done is change what's existing, because you can see the configured here rather than created. And we can again look at those logs coming up from the pipeline. And we can see that now we're creating these kind of Kubernetes objects. But our users don't care. Our users don't even know. This has now been completely left in the hands of us as implementation of platform engineers to decide what's best for this specific implementation. I don't know about you, but I struggle with the idea of a production database being controlled by Kubernetes. I may want to keep that in Terraform. I may want to keep that with some manual checks. But an S3 bucket in development, like, throw it into Crossplane, right? Throw it into an auto reconciliation loop. Depends on your organization, depends on what you need, but now you're unleashed to use the thing that you need. So and what you can see is when we update that promise, we not only rerun the promise workflows, we also rerun each of the workflows for the resources. So we now have fleet management. When you want to update that Terraform module to using Crossplane, or even within Terraform, update it to introduce new security measures for your organization, it's going to roll out with a single Docker image update, right, across your entire fleet. So they're not just about refactors, they're also about managing some big risks in your organization around security and other things. And unfortunately, I have talked too much, so I don't have time to show another update of the promise, but I'll have the machine with me and I won't tear down the environment, so feel free to come up. And I'm sorry, one last, just the wrap up. By introducing APIs, it unleashes both sides to be independent. It allows you to introduce things like business logic on your way through. And so we need to keep that revolutionary spirit without removing the realities of those long tails of migrations. We need to make sure we're asking of ourselves and of our tools that we both build and buy what day two looks like right from the start. We want to introduce patterns without doing rewrites, because we are not the ones making money for the business, right? We are supporting them. How do we do this while the plane is in the air? We need to decouple implementation from user experience. Nah, new users do not want to get started using Helm and Kubernetes and all of that. They were already frustrated by Ansible and Terraform and the tools you used to use. And keep in mind that in reality, every tool has a lifespan. So if your users are directly integrating with that tool, you're going to have a hard time migrating away from it. So be conscious about what tools you put in your users' hands. I will leave this one up for a second with some QR codes. These are some of the tools that I used in the demo. I also have a virtual machine I can hand out to people. If you're interested, just contact me. So you can try this yourself. And then a few more QR codes around communities and where we can catch up more. So thank you very much.
Awesome.